Welcome, thank you. So I'm Victoria Burns and I'm the coordinator for Culture Declares. That means just sort of holding it all together in some way or making the connections. So I'm sort of assuming you all know what Culture Declares is. So we are born in the cultural sector. We started in the UK and we've recently sort of acknowledged that fact by naming what happens in the UK, CDE UK, as opposed to sort of being a mouthpiece for the growing kind of global movement. And we are sort of in a period of transition around what that means and how to kind of move forward and hold the or to play our part in the kind of proliferation of the global movement. But basically, yes, we're started in the UK from the cultural sector. We look at the Earth crisis or the climate and ecological emergency as a problem of culture from within the cultural sector and look at what arts and culture's role is within that. So I think that seeing the crisis through the lens of culture immediately engages you with the justice aspects of the causes and the solutions. And then we look at the whole kind of range of what arts and culture can do, from design to sort of engaging different sorts of communities in their places. So place-based work has been part of very much what we do from the very outset. So the idea that people are most likely to engage with solutions in meaningful ways in their places and have the most democratic and fair and just solutions to adaptation and mitigation of the baked impacts. And there's one more person joining us. So yes, so we're a global movement. There are about 2,000 declarers from organizations right through to sort of amateur crafters. So I think that will do our shall we just go around and introduce ourselves, and then and as we do so, we can talk about Climate Museum UK and also introduce yourself. So shall I pass to you, Bridget?
Yes, hello. I can be brief. I am Bridget McKenzie. I founded Climate Museum UK, and I also co-founded Culture Declares Emergency. So both Victoria and I have two hats, and it's a little bit confusing. But Climate Museum UK has a different function from the movement Culture Declares, because it's much more a platform for us to do particular kinds of experimental work that engages people with climate and biodiversity issues using the arts and heritage. I'm going to share my screen and share my slides, and I'm going to do more of the talking, but I hope that we're going to make enough space for discussion and sharing. And we are recording this, and usually with the offer, we actually share the videos. So we could make a decision, you know, about how much we share of our personal creativity, and how, and Victoria made clear as well that, you know, afterwards we might share some of the work that we make on social media, but you can always say if you don't want it shared. So yeah, this is a kind of collaboration really between Climate Museum and Culture Declares, and two of us, and at least two of us, are the same. Jamie as well is very involved in both. Sorry, I forgot. We're very much a sort of overlapping two organisations coming together for this. So we're going to explore how we face the Earth crisis, the worsening Earth crisis, and the impact on our work and the role of our work, you know, the role of our creative practice. We're going to start the creative response through a self-sensing reflection that kind of centers ourselves or grounds ourselves while kind of facing outwards to the world. And then we'll do another layer of creativity that expands outwards to approach the Earth crisis, the trouble. Then I'll do a bit of an info download about the crisis. Then we'll have a bit of discussion about that. And then we'll return at the end to our creative work and explore a bit how to alter them, maybe sort of disrupt or change them in some way, and then share what we've done. So you might want to take photos as you're going if you're going to be altering your piece. And in terms of I will just say an important thing about values, that I want to express huge gratitude that I'm still or that I am in a situation, in a privileged country, in a time, in a place where I am able to do creative work and able to have, you know, convivial discussions with people that can look into the deep past and the deep future, and that we, you know, and when I say we, I don't mean everyone. I mean we, perhaps in this room, in this group, are able to you know, that we have access to creativity, because it is a huge privilege. So with that, I also don't want to set any boundaries on what kind of creative methods you use. I've suggested, you know, a sketchbook, but in that you might want to use collage, drawing, writing. You might instead want to have, you know, an array of objects, you know, make something 3D or sculptural with things that you have on your desk. You might want to, you know, make shapes with your body. You might want to, you know, maybe make sounds. It's not just a drawing activity. It's about making a creative response that feels appropriate to the prompts. Are there any questions before we begin with the creative responding, or any suggestions before we start? No.
I'm just really going with the flow, because I have no idea. I was curious from Instagram, and I have no idea where the journey we're going on. So
Okay, good, excellent. That's and maybe, you know, the fact that something like 26, 27 registered and such a smaller number have turned up shows that it is actually quite a challenging thing to do, you know, to come to a creative session that is facing such an enormous and open-ended and uncertain situation. So we've got, you know, extremely open-ended creativity in a very open-ended situation. So yeah, thank you for coming. So yeah, we're going to start the process with an inner reflection activity, and you can draw, write, or however you wish to respond while I talk through this kind of meditational exercise. And what we're using here is a healing circle. And, you know, big thanks to those Indigenous American communities that have developed work with this healing circle. Some people call it a medicine wheel, but it's more proper to call it a healing circle. So you might want to draw a circle or delineate it in your mind, or create a circle in your space. Or, you know, maybe write it with some words around the outside of your page. It's up to you. So the healing circle is a directional tool that centers the self in relation to all other beings, and, you know, the elements and the directions. And so we're going to go in turn to each direction, and you could, you know, maybe be aware of where the directions are, you know, sort of orient yourself in space. Sometimes you can do this exercise where you actually stand and face those directions, but I'm suggesting you know, sit and draw or write. So we will start in the east, because this is the direction associated with your body. So yeah, I mean, you might want to just kind of use your pencil or pens in some way that help you reflect on, or kind of draw the shape of what you're sensing in your body in this moment. So, you know, maybe pay attention to your heartbeat, you know, go inwards into your body. Can you feel your heartbeat? Can you feel your breathing? And when I say feel, I suppose I mean sensations in your, you know, your organs, your musculature, your you know, the pulsing of your body, but also what you're hearing, what you're tasting, what you feel on your skin, in your mouth. So I'll just pause for you to listen in, reflect a little bit on your body, where there's tension, where there's a lot of energy pent up, maybe, where you've forgotten. So we'll now move to face the south, and the south is associated with fire. Because of the tilt of the earth, the south is, you know, sunnier. Well, the southern direction has more sun. So, and this is associated with the mind. So this is really about enlightenment, about reason, how we make sense of things with words. So this is where you might want to start writing if you weren't already, or, you know, drawing symbols. What's coming to your mind? Words, images, maybe questions you have. Maybe think about the pace of your mental activity. Have you been raging or calm today in your mind? And I know that won't have been enough time, but we're sort of adding layers and integrating as we go. So this layer, the West, is about the emotions, and the emotions are an expression of our body. You know, they are how we make sense of or name the feelings in our body. So this is about bringing together those bodily sensations with those words and images that came to mind. Can you actually bring those together and name your emotions? And there might not be any single emotion, there might be multiple contradictory emotions. Are there images that convey those emotions, or marks or shapes? And then adding a fourth layer and sort of going deeper, both deeper into the self, but also expanding further out into the wider collective world, which is into the spiritual realm. So this might be shifting into a longer time scale, you know, deeper into time. And so the north is associated with the spiritual. you know, it's potentially associated with ancestors and yeah, pausing and you know, a lack of growth, but a sense of reflection and pausing and waiting. So in that kind of, imagine yourself in a sort of cool space where you need to draw upon your strongest values, you know, perhaps imagining yourself in a time of, or a space of lack, you know, maybe a snowy wasteland. What are the strongest values and the stories that you return to again and again in times like this? Yeah. Does that make sense? I hope so. It might not be a word for a value. It might be, you might think of a story and you might represent that with a shape or a just some kind of symbol, or it might be an ancestor, you know, or somebody who has meant a lot to you and helped you yeah, acquire those values. How are people doing? Would you like a little bit more time for this, or would you be willing to move on to the next prompt in a few seconds? Willing to move on to the next prompt, the next dimension, the 5th dimension. Okay. So, having made that kind of grounding journey where we've reflected on our bodies, our minds, our emotions, and our spiritual values, we can almost be ready to think about the Earth crisis. So Tim Morton, who's a philosopher, theologist, writer, says that climate change is a hyper object. So it's, you know, it's too big, too complex, too overwhelming to grasp. But the Earth crisis includes climate change, and so therefore it's even bigger than that hyper object. And so it is, you know, incredibly difficult to grasp all of its parts. But what if it could be small enough for us to hold or picture? You know, so it's almost about sort of shrinking it in a way so that we can actually manage to almost hold it in our hand, or, you know, put it in our picture, to integrate it into that sort of map of ourselves. So, you know, we can maybe each of us find memories or metaphors or shapes when we approach it, and that we can use to convey it. So I'm, you know, yeah, just add that 5th dimension to your sketch or your map. I'll just give you a bit of time to do that. Okay. Is this bit more difficult? Do you need a bit more time for this one? No. Stop sharing so I can see you. You could there'll be a chance to share at the very end, because you can carry on, so you can carry on drawing, mark making, adding to what you're doing while I do a bit of talking. So I'll share my screen again. Oh, hang on. Can't see where the slideshow bit is. Here we are. Okay, so the Earth crisis is the term that I use and is increasingly used by people in Climate Museum, at least. And I think it's a preferable term to the meta crisis or poly crisis or omni crisis that have been used as more current terms in the last year or so, or at least since COVID, really. There's this increasing recognition that that colonialism, big pandemics, conflict are rooted in the same causes as environmental problems. But I prefer to use the term Earth crisis because I think that all major current problems arise from harmful exploitative relationships to biological life, which includes humans. So, if you don't actually make any separation between humans and other forms of biological life, then then you see things in a much more integrated way. It's a kind of fundamental principle for seeing the whole system. And the key thing is that there's a disregard in our dominant culture for the vulnerability of Earth's operating systems, and then also, it's the treasures of its biosphere, the wild habitats. So these rings are the kind of dimensions that move. If you start from the outside and move inwards, it starts from the societal and systemic causes of the problem, in particular accelerating with industrial production and the consumption of fossil fuels that leads to a massive increase in population growth and a population that is increasingly consuming. And that's all intersecting with structural racism, the grabbing of lands and then the conflict over lands, proliferation and license to pollute and waste, and extract and destroy. And now we're just kind of almost entangled in this system of separation and exploitation. And it's leading to these impacts on life that are, harmful in so many ways to bodies, and in particular to the bodies of people who are exploited in labor, and animals that are exploited as livestock. And so that leads to the breaching of the planetary boundaries, and I'll come to that in a minute. But in the center is the kind of the blue zone, which is the center of potential solutions or tactics. And this is just a few of the many, many, many possible effective actions. I've put a few in the center there that are to do with things like CO2 capture, because I've used this diagram in a model that's called Earth Crisis Blinkers, where some people have a very narrow blinkered vision right across the center, where they're only looking at climate change and they're only looking at the technical solutions like CO2 capture. So don't think that because I've got that in the center that I think it's a wonderful solution. Anyway, the planetary boundaries are, you've probably heard of them, everybody, but they are a measure of the health of Earth systems by the Stockholm Resilience Centre, and they help us consider the interactions of essentially many types of pollution, which include climate change and biodiversity loss. So you could see this in two halves. One of them is ecocide and the direct damage of nature that leads to biodiversity loss, and pollution, which includes things like novel entities, which is, sort of toxic materials that have never been in these kind of quantities or types before in our ecosystems. So pretty much all of the significant ones are now assessed as being breached. So ocean acidification is now on the threshold of being breached. And these are markers of systems that can't heal or stabilize without urgent large-scale intervention. And climate change is a threat multiplier. So although it doesn't look as if it's breached as much as some others, it's the most significant of all of them because it intersects with all of the other breached planetary boundaries and many of these other kind of human impacts on human life that are to do with inequalities and racism. So yeah, climate change is the major threat multiplier. So that's why we need to focus on climate, but we also need to do so with a wider awareness of that Earth crisis. And I think it is quite helpful to use graphs and facts and statistics like this one that shows, where we are in terms of the global average temperature. We're now at pretty much 1.5 according to that chart, and the baked in emissions mean that our current trajectory is heading for 3 degrees C potentially. So we need to be actually considering what it means to be living in 3 degrees C above the global background temperature or pre-industrial temperature. So there's been some recent research. It came out in July. It's just been shared in The Guardian, and so therefore it's started to get around on social media in the past week. But I saw this in early July when I was at Buddhafield Festival, and it I just had an enormous kind of like stomach lurch, sleeplessness. I've been quite sleepless all through the summer thinking about this. That basically, the natural carbon sinks of forests and soil and oceans, they're not functioning like they used to absorb carbon dioxide in balance with the emissions that are still coming out. So yeah, their capacity has plummeted, and this is because, for example, there's ocean acidification. There's the fact that forests are so dry and they're burning and they're continually being deforested. So it's not a statistical anomaly; it's a red flag, indicating a potentially catastrophic shift in our climate system. So that's the depressing fact, and I've been sort of subtly sharing this since July, but in a very scared way. I didn't want to depress people. I didn't even want to include it in this event, because it seems to kind of go against the ability to imagine and dream and be creative. So, but I also believe, you know, as culture declares, our core value, one of our core values is about telling the truth. But it's really important as well to be aware of what we can do. And this is a kind of disruption nexus. It's what Roman Krasnick in his book History for Tomorrow calls a disruption nexus, when you know, massive change is possible as there is awareness of what needs to happen. And this is a model that I've created that is the spiral of inner work and then 8 ways to take action. And you can have these slides so you can access this and return to it again and again. But in a way, they're kind of healing circles, aren't they? You know, they're things that we can do. And importantly, on the action side, the things that we can do are not just limited to domestic action or, you know, reducing the footprint of our existing activities. These 8 pathways show how every individual can in some way enable systemic change on a larger scale, even if it means helping others who are less able to take powerful action. So, you know, it's always about bringing everybody on so that we can all expand beyond our beyond what we think are our limits of action. And the inner circle is based on the inner development goals that are being promoted by the UN alongside the sustainable development goals. But I've added some practical suggestions. And in the Earth Talk course and book, there's much, much more information about how to carry out all of these actions. So moving on briefly now to the question of what, how is this relevant to culture? So, you know, this is a disruption nexus. It's a time of rapid potential change. And those of us in the cultural sector can really use culture to rethink what society and the economy are, you know, and how we think about environmental action. So on the left is the standard triple bottom line model of sustainability, where you have these 3 overlapping circles of economic sustainability, social sustainability, and environmental sustainability. But the reality of that is that very often the biggest circle, huge, is economy, you know, creating profit and being more efficient. And that kind of, you know, is all about ensuring that the workforce is well. So, you know, that sort of extractive economic framing is all about enriching people, lifting people up through economic growth. And the environment is really just something to be sacrificed and dominated, while, you know, ensuring that there's enough in your little bit or in your little industry to ensure that you can carry on profiting. So culture is nowhere in that frame. It just kind of serves the economy with entertainment and commodities, and it heals where that economic system is causing harm. So it has these 2 functions. But what we need to think about is culture for life, which is enabling life-regenerating economies, life-honouring societies, and creating conditions on Earth that are conducive to life again. So this, I hope, is leading us nicely into discussion, responses. What are your thoughts and feelings now? You know, you can keep drawing, adding thoughts and feelings to your sketches. But I'm interested what you think about, you know, what does the unfolding emergency mean for our creative practices? You know, what might you do creatively? Does it want, I'll just stop sharing. What does it, what does this thinking make you want to do with and for culture? and creativity. We have come to an end. It's late. It's time to thank everybody. Thanks so much for your creative responses and ideas. And thanks, Les, and also Liz, who's gone now, but you know, for being brave, and coming together with strangers and being creative and open. Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you, Bridget, for leading this.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. Little chance to be creative together.
Yeah, it's nice. We should do more of that.
Yeah.